On November 4th, 1979, right in the heart of Tehran, thousands of angry people had jumped over the gates and stormed into the United States Embassy, targeting 58 American citizens. The embassy security surrendered, and within a few hours, 52 American diplomats and workers fell into the hands of the Iranian protesters. They had only one demand from the American government: send back the Shah of Iran, or be prepared to see the dead faces of your people. Amidst all this chaos, 6 American diplomats managed to escape through a secret door of the embassy. For the next several days, they kept hiding, running, and changing their appearances. With each passing day, the risk of them being caught kept increasing. Getting them out of Iran alive was nothing short of a mission impossible, but this very mission was assigned to America's Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA. And so, a stage was set for the shooting of a fake Hollywood movie, complete with fake actors, a fake script, and even printed posters for the fake film. But this was not a real movie. This was a CIA rescue mission, codenamed Argo. Political turmoil in Iran had reached its peak. A few months earlier, in January 1979, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the former ruler of Iran, fled the country under the pressure of public protests. His 38-year rule was backed by the United States, but the Iranian people had grown weary of him because the Shah of Iran himself was living a life of luxury. Most of the control in Iran was in the hands of the United States. Decisions were made according to America's wishes, and all control over oil was also with the U.S., while the people of Iran were becoming poorer and poorer. In people's hearts, the Shah of Iran was now respected only as an American puppet. The Shah of Iran's secret police, known as SAVAK, would make people tremble just by hearing its name, because SAVAK would crush any kind of opposition. Amidst this political storm, a man returned from exile, and that man was none other than Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. He was a religious leader who received both the anger and support of the people. Khomeini led the Islamic Revolution, and within just a few weeks, Iran's system changed from a monarchy to one based on Islamic law, and Iran became the Islamic Republic of Iran. With this power shift, there was a dramatic rise in anti-Western sentiment. The United States was now seen not just as an ally of the Shah, but as a corrupt Western country. On the streets of Tehran, people attacked embassies, burned American flags, and chanted slogans against the U.S. People's anger against America grew even more when they found out that the Shah of Iran had been given refuge by the U.S., and at that point, their demand was that the Shah be sent back to Iran. To teach America a lesson, Iranian protesters planned to take U.S. embassy employees hostage. On November 4th, 1979, thousands of protesters gathered outside the U.S. embassy in Tehran, and chanting slogans, they climbed over the walls and gates and stormed inside. When the security guards saw the crowd of thousands, they too surrendered and stepped aside, and in the end, out of the 58 people inside, 52 American nationals were taken hostage. But the protesters didn't know that the embassy had a secret door at the back that opened directly onto the street. During this attack, 6 American diplomats managed to quietly slip out through this secret door. But they had no plan, no cover. They couldn't go out in public, nor could they use any official channels, and going back to the embassy was like inviting death. At that time, Tehran had become a prison for foreigners. In the first few hours, they tried to avoid the crowds and refrained from using the phone. These American diplomats could easily be recognized because of their faces. Even the smallest mistake could have cost them their lives. They asked several embassies for shelter, but everyone refused out of fear that if the Iranian revolutionaries found out, the consequences would be dire. Meanwhile, the Canadian ambassador, Ken Taylor, helped them. Even though the Canadian government kept telling him not to, Ken Taylor still took them into his safe house on his own responsibility. These 6 American diplomats hid in the Canadian ambassador's house for the next 3 months. Their presence was kept a strict secret. They neither appeared near any window nor dared to go outside. The names of the diplomats who escaped from the embassy were Robert Anders, who was a consular officer, Mark Lyjak, vice consul, his wife Cora Lyjak, who worked in the immigration department, Joseph Stafford, political officer, and his wife Kathleen Stafford, who handled visa documentation, and finally, Lee Schatz, who was an agricultural attaché. When the United States found out that 6 diplomats had escaped the hostage situation, the U.S. government kept this information top secret. Announcing it publicly could not only put their lives in even greater danger, but also risk the lives of the 52 Americans who were in the protesters' custody. If the Iranian revolutionaries found out, a massive manhunt could have been launched, and there was also a chance that the Canadian embassy would be attacked. And the embarrassment for America would have been a whole other issue. That's why the U.S. entrusted this operation to CIA expert Tony Mendez. The CIA came up with several plans at first, including getting the diplomats out through UN trucks, escaping disguised as local Iranians, and leaving via another embassy's route. But every option was extremely risky. The American government didn't have any plan that was 100% safe. But Tony Mendez came up with an idea that no one had even imagined, and this plan also seemed technically possible. He proposed staging a fake science fiction movie production. The film crew would come to Iran on an official tour, as if they were scouting locations for the movie. This way, they would have a logical reason to stay in Tehran, and most importantly, in the end, they could legally leave the country through the airport if they had a passport from another country. But the condition is that this cover shouldn't be so interesting that it attracts everyone's attention, and it should only be realistic enough to convince the Iranian authorities. And that's where the idea for the production of a fake Hollywood science fiction film was born. Tony Mendez's plan was to create a completely fabricated story. A story about a film crew coming to Iran, whose purpose would be to scout locations in the Middle East for a big science fiction movie. He deliberately chose the science fiction genre because in it, you can easily make excuses for all sorts of strange things, and that's how Argo was born, a film that was never actually made. To make it look real, they opened an actual office in Hollywood. An office that looked just like a professional studio. They set up furniture, film scripts, telephones, posters, and even hired staff to attend calls. News about Argo was deliberately leaked to the Hollywood media. Fake quotations, fabricated producer interviews, and marketing materials were circulated. Tony Mendez knew that if anyone tried to find proof that this film was real, they would definitely find something. The script written for Argo was also specially prepared for this mission. The script repeatedly mentioned Middle Eastern locations, for which Tehran's landscape was the most perfect. This lie was crafted into the truth with such finesse that it was very difficult to doubt it. Each of those 6 Americans was given a specific role. One became a screenwriter, another a cinematographer, and another a set designer. Everyone was assigned a distinct professional identity. They were all given complete documentation, fake Canadian passports, business cards, production schedules, and a classy brochure that detailed the film project. Everything was just like a real Hollywood film production, but simply creating documents wasn't enough. The real challenge was to train these people on how to play their roles, how to behave with customs officials, how to answer questions, how to walk, talk, and act with the confidence of film industry professionals. Tony Mendez gave them all a crash course. They were taught every single detail, that if someone asks you who you are, the answer shouldn't just be in your passport, it should be on your face and in your tone. The first milestone of the mission had been achieved, and mentally, these 6 Americans had now become film crew members. Now the next challenge was to make this whole story look like it was actually happening inside Tehran. After weeks of preparation, Tony Mendez got permission to go to Iran with a fake identity as a Canadian film producer who wanted to scout locations in Iran for a science fiction movie. His cover was supported by official documents that had already been approved in collaboration with Canadian authorities. In January 1980, Tony Mendez arrived in Tehran, posing as an ordinary foreign visitor. No one suspected anything when he entered, because Tony had all the legal documentation and a Canadian passport, and his fabricated story was also supported by news reports published in the media. As soon as he arrived in Tehran, he first contacted Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor, and then a meeting was arranged with those 6 Americans. For safety reasons, this meeting took place inside the ambassador's residence so that no one would get even the slightest hint. Then Mendez gave everyone a detailed briefing on how to behave at the airport, what to say to the border officials, which points to highlight, and which questions to avoid. They were repeatedly told that they had to present themselves to the Iranian authorities as a confident, professional film crew who were only there on a short business trip. But if this plan failed, or if anyone made even a small mistake, everyone already knew what the consequences would be. Not only would these 6 Americans get trapped, but the negotiations the U.S. was conducting to rescue the 52 hostages would also be affected. On top of that, the Canadian embassy would face major problems as well, since it was Canada that had issued the fake passports. For the next few days, they kept preparing, and finally, the time had come to face the Iranian authorities at Tehran airport. It was an ordinary morning at Tehran airport. People were coming and going. People were coming and going. Check-ins were happening. Among those people was a group, a film producer and his 6 crew members. They were all confident, relaxed, and speaking English with a slight accent. There was only one issue here. The 6 crew members with fake Canadian passports didn't have any entry stamps for Iran in their passports. Tony Mendez was aware that a new government had just come to power in Iran. The customs and border security system was quite disturbed, and in such a situation, missing a stamp was a common thing. If the Iranian officials raised any issue about this, the only solution would be confidence. At one checkpoint, a guard stopped after seeing the title art director, and another looked at the visa a bit longer. But fortunately, their cover story was so real that no one suspected a thing. The crew members behaved just like ordinary travelers, and on top of that, the Canadian embassy was on standby to immediately confirm if any verification call came. When boarding was announced, everyone calmly got up, crossed the gate, and boarded the Swiss airplane. After the plane took off, until it left Iranian airspace, the 6 diplomats and Tony Mendez kept their emotions in check. But the mission wasn't over yet. Upon reaching Zurich, U.S. authorities took them into their custody and quietly brought them to America. There were no headlines anywhere, no official statements. Everything was kept top secret. This cover story wasn't just for their safety, but also to protect Canada's involvement. This story remained a secret for the next 17 years, and then in 1997, after 17 years, the CIA finally declassified the documents. Tony Mendez himself told the whole story of how a fake film, a bogus studio, and an impossible mission saved 6 lives. The remaining 52 American hostages were finally released on January 20th, 1981, after being held captive for 444 days, coinciding with Ronald Reagan becoming the U.S. president. The Shah of Iran, because of whom this entire situation arose, died of cancer in America on July 27, 1980. The story of Argo, which was once only in classified files, has now become a subject for journalists, historians, and filmmakers all over the world. A movie was also made about it, but many scenes in the film were far from reality. To make the story more interesting, the movie heavily highlighted the CIA's role. But in reality, this mission would not have been possible without the help of Canadian Ambassador Ken Taylor. Ken Taylor was declared a national hero in Canada, and the U.S. also awarded him a gold medal. The Argo mission, which the media dubbed the Canadian Caper, was the incident after which the U.S. Embassy in Iran never reopened. After the mission, Canada also closed its embassy and recalled its diplomats.